Okay, here we go. I'm going to start that over because I don't know who was able to catch that or not. But the first question up here is, what do I think about analog synths? And I think the whole thing of analog versus digital is a matter of price versus convenience. Ironically, just yesterday I was going through YouTube and looking up my favorite synth that I haven't seen in person in probably 20 years. It's called the Oscar, the OSC Oscar. It was a British synth put out in the early 80s, 82, 83, something like that. Made famous by a lot of people. It was kind of ugly because it was brown and mustard colored and had a very strange S routing to it and had big rubber bumpers. People didn't like that very much, but it's amazing sounding. And GeForce has the Imposker and now the Imposker 2. And so comparing the two, I mean, if I had $5,000, I would most likely have an Oscar just because it's fun to have your hands on things. That said, it's more than likely more useful to buy the Imposker because the sound quality is great, and they've actually had a chance to improve certain functions. For example, building your own analog harmonic wavetable bass. I shouldn't say wavetable, that's a misnomer. With analog synthesis, additive synthesis, and you're choosing your harmonics, apparently working on the keyboard is quite difficult, but in the software, there's just a matrix of red dots. You can just wiggle your mouse and create whatever kind of additive harmonic wave spectrum you like. So is it worth a couple $100 to buy the software? Well, hell yes. If you had a spare 3, 4, or 5 grand kicking around and you found an Oscar at a garage sale, you should pick it up because it's only going to go up in price. So yeah, analog synths, amazing. In terms of how to make organic, natural sounding synths, I'm not sure I know what organic, natural sounding means. Do you mean old school analog? Do you mean that when you twist the knobs, you don't hear brrrr, you don't hear digital zippering? Usually that's a function of finding the right tool that has the right either code if it's software or circuitry if it's analog or digital circuitry if it's digitally controlled, where those actions don't create digital stair stepping. A lot of it has to do with honestly trial and error and experimentation. So I'm not sure how best to approach the question of organic, natural sounding synths, but if you're more specific with your question, you might want to grab one of the synthesis mentors here and dig into that with them. I'm going to jump on here. Fukushi says, "Hi Matt, I love when you do theory and arrangement breaking. I think breakdowns. What are the next songs you plan on analyzing?" Great question. I am about 90% done with the opening track to Madion's Adventure. The song is called Isometric. There are a lot of interesting things going on in that track. The chords in particular. There's one chord I just don't quite have perfectly. I don't quite have it really nailed, but I've got a pretty good mock-up. I was going to shoot it before this, but it's not quite ready. So next week I should be shooting Madion Isometric, the first track, and it's going to be one of several parts because the song is it's a short song, but it's kind of big. There are a lot of things going on, some technical, some theory that I really want to spend time with. Should be pretty awesome. I may end up doing the whole record because if you guys haven't heard this record, Madion's Adventure, it's quite good. And by quite good, I'm underestimating and underselling it. It's some EDM songs, you hear them, they're amazing, and then after a couple of listens, you don't need to hear it anymore. This record keeps giving. I'm back on my 9th listen to the whole album, and it just keeps giving. It just keeps giving. There's more to discover. There's some really excellent songwriting in there and some fantastic production, so I'm very impressed. And I appreciate the work. It's fantastic. I'm going to dig into at least Isometric. Okay, so cool. Thanks for that. Producer 7 says I'm good in this end. Awesome. Thank you, Fukushi. Thank you so much for fixing spelling. No worries. I appreciate it. I knew what you meant. Success. Hey, what books do you recommend on music theory and arranging? Ha 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 ha. Without meaning to sound too self-promotional, many years ago, I wrote a book for Pyramind called, strangely enough, Music Theory, Keyboard, and Songwriting. Not so much on arranging, but very much how to demystify this thing over here, and how to really understand what chords are, where they came from, how they work, how to line them up, how to use them. Some of it's academic and some of it's practical. You can get it on Amazon. Let me see. I don't know if I want to go searching on Amazon, but it's called. I think if you just type in Amazon the Pyramind method, Amazon will want to correct you and say, "You mean pyramid method?" No, I mean Pyramind method. We have 3 books up there, published by Alfred many years ago. That theory songwriting book. They were all written to be evergreen, but that one in particular could be a good reference for you. Peter Maxwell says, analog sounding on digital synths. Yeah, again, I think it comes down to, and I don't want to sit here and propose that I'm like the world's most amazing sound designer, or there are guys here, Chris Gear, if you caught his Q&A, Chris is fantastic. He may have more detailed answers for you, but at the end of the day, analog sounding synths and digital formats tends to come down to a matter of programming. Let me dig into this for a moment and explain myself. If you compare a tool like Retro Machines from Native Instruments to, say, Massive, also Native Instruments, to, say, the Virus, which I have at home, to, say, Serum, for fairly useful tools. Almost all of them are digital in one form or another, and some of them are entirely digital. To make them sound analog, a lot of it comes down to how detailed or the sound sources. Is a square wave drawn beautifully and perfectly like a square wave? Is a sine wave, what's the resolution? Does it really sinusoidal, or is it 44,100 samples of sinusoidal? Is there oversampling, and so you get 44,000 samples and then 256 times that? What's the code base? Is there an actual analog synthesizer in your hardware that maybe is digitally controlled, but it's an analog oscillator? The oscillator would be one place to take a look and listen to see how analog it really is. Use your ears and test it and play with it and see if that sounds analog-y. Then you want to look to how smooth are the curves and the envelopes, how smooth is the filter. That's usually an easy place to test. And grab a sound, hit play, grab a low-pass filter, turn the resonance up a little bit, and then start sweeping the cutoff and see if you can hear it zippering, like you can hear the little steps. It's not that analog. Anyway, that's basically my thought. But at the end of the day, no matter what you're using, little trick, if you have this capability, if it's possible for you to run your synths out of the digital world through boxes with electricity and wires and then capture that analog sound backwards or back into the system, a lot of times you can smooth out a lot of the digital curves. If you're a laptop producer and you're pretty much headphones, plug in, MIDI, and you're done, then your options are quite limited because you only have the 1/8 inch output here. An interface of some sort, even if it's a 2x2 or 4x4. I'm speaking to you now through a microphone into something called a Zoom. I think it's H6 is the model number. Even something like that, where you take your 2 channels out, run into something analog, and recapture it. In that process, a lot of the digital edges smooth out, and then you can get more of an analog-esque kind of sound. But again, the real smoothness of analog synthesizers is that the circuitry is live and it's all electronic, so everything is this beautiful curved sinusoidal sound, no matter how complex it gets. Okay. Wow, guys are just blasting with questions. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, so full octave. What VSTs do you use on your master channel? Thank you, full octave, for that question. That's a really, really powerful one, and I don't know if you're going to like my answer or not. You ready? My answer is none. None. I don't think it's wise. I may be unique in this opinion. I may be in the minority in this opinion, and that's fine. I don't like to put anything on the master fader. I suggest to all of my students, and have for years, do not rely on the master fader. Anything that goes on the master fader affects the entire mix. And if there's a problem in your mix, I would almost always recommend you go find the problem and fix the problem in the mix side of things, not on the two-channel master. Particularly if you're just starting out, because obviously we work with a lot of students here, some of them fairly experienced, some of them not experienced at all. There's a temptation to just smack ozone and L1 and everything you can on the master fader, because it kind of makes it sound good, makes it sound more ready for the world. And 7 out of 10 times you're overdoing it. You're really heavy-handed with the effects because you're just getting familiar with them, and you're just smashing the hell out of your music. And where you could have had real dynamics and real emotive power, you end up sacrificing for volume. Anything that you would or could or think you should put on the master fader, I almost always recommend don't. Print your mix and then take that 2-channel into another session where all you can do for your whole headspace, just focus on mastering the sound. And if more than anything else, A, you have an entire computer's worth of CPU dedicated to the mastering process, and B, you don't have to use that mindset in the mix session. The mix session is your last opportunity to be creative. You should be using this side of your brain, but mastering is really this side of your brain. And I say in my producing and arranging 101 class that a lot of times people don't finish tracks is because they're subconsciously or unconsciously bouncing back and forth between the various hemispheres in their brain, exhausting their mental capacity and not being as productive as possible. And I think mastering while you're mixing is just another symptom of that same problem. So my recommendation, honestly, full octave, nothing. Put nothing on the master fader. Put 0 VSTs on your master fader and leave the volume at 0. Don't touch the master fader, period. If your mix is clipping, you got to go backwards to your faders and bring things down intelligently. You may have to highlight all your automation curves and trim them back by 1 dB, 2 dBs, and that might affect the way that sounds are cascading into each other if you have complicated compression routing, serial parallel compression routing, sidechain routing. It's difficult, it's annoying, it's frustrating, it's time consuming, but the process is better in the long run. You will learn more, and the next time you go to mix, you'll be much more cognizant of that master fader and keeping all of your levels out of the red without having to touch the master fader. I can almost guarantee you better results each time. So like I said, I don't know if you like that answer. That's my answer. 0 on the master fader. Thanks. Fukushi. Yeah, you got noticed. Woo! Maurice Trudell. Do the whole record. Yes, please. Yes, I will do my best. It's an intricate and complicated record. It's going to take me quite a lot of time. I don't imagine that he blasted through it when he wrote it. It's not possible that I can blast through it afterwards either. And I want to do it justice because I think it's a really, really good record. Let's see. How do you find or build sounds that fit together? Is it trial and error or tune 3? Yeah. This is a big one. It may start as trial and error. One of the, not necessarily hardest, but one of the broadest areas, particularly in electronic music, is the unbelievable breadth and depth and potential of the sound design tools that are available to you. Anyone who owns Logic, you already have more synthesis than you can get through as a beginner. It's going to take you months, if not years, to really start wrapping your head around how these things really work. It will take as long to experiment through trial and error to start creating sounds that have certain characteristics. If you talk to Chris, he uses a series of words that I think are pretty important, one of which, the most important of which he uses, is shape. Shape has a lot to do with time and enveloping. At Pyramind, we use a phrase, time, timbre, and texture, which has to do with oscillators, envelopes, and then modulation, first, second, third order modulation, LFOs of envelopes that apply to other things. The more you get deep with the componentry and the routing and the possibilities of synthesis, the more controlled it is for you, the less trial and error it will be. I always recommend preset surfing. And as you preset surf, you don't have to know why a sound is good. It's just that it is good, and as soon as it is good, make sure you save it to a particular folder or a library or a track in a template, so that as you start collecting sounds that you like, you have them at the ready. In terms of that's how you find good sounds. In terms of your question, which is how do you find or build sounds that fit together, it's a similar process, but it's the next level. If you continue to think about time and timbre and texture, the byproduct of all of that is a word that I use in the producing class called behavior. What is the behavior of the synth? And that involves just observationally listening. While you're creating, you're just writing and you're playing and shit sounds cool and it's awesome and woohoo. But afterwards, there's usually an organizational process where you go back and try to figure out what you did. What did I do? What did I make? What do I have? What is it? How do I make it work? And in that process, you want to be thinking about the behavior of the part. Is it bouncing along with arpeggiated 16th notes? Is it slowly pad developing itself like a big wave? Does it kind of ramp up and go away? Or is it just hit and quit like a pluck? And if you think about it from the time perspective, right? Time, timbre, texture. If you think about it from the time perspective, the behavior of one sound might give you a clue as to the behavior of the next sound so that the two can work together. You might not want 2 or 3 or 4 competing 16th note arpeggiations. I mean, if everybody's going for you have multiple arpeggiations, it's going to translate to it's too busy to the ear. You want to think about the audience and give them enough to listen to that's interesting and entertaining and moving, but not so much that they can't pick out what's being said, and not so little that they're just desperately waiting for you to say the next thing. So I usually recommend listening to the sounds that you already have. And the simplest maneuver, honestly, and this is, again, part of the class, I'll give you a little clue here. One of the simplest maneuvers is to take the MIDI part and simply option drag it to the next track and change the sound so that the part and the behavior of the MIDI over here is the same information over here. Now, with 2 different synths, it's going to trigger 2 different results, but at least the notes are going to be good. You add complication when you play a part on one synth, and then you go to play a second part on a second synth. Well, it's just now 2 things you have to try to shoehorn together. What is the behavior of the sound, and then what is the behavior of my notes? And it's simpler to remove that second piece and say, well, we have the same behavior of notes over here as we have over here. So track 1, Serum, with some super cool pluck, and then track 2, Massive, with some super saw sound. Do those 2 go together? You're going to have a much easier time judging whether they work if the MIDI behavior is the same. So sorry about the accidental note. So my recommendation right there is to go one at a time and think about the behavior of the sounds and think about the behavior of the part. Think about its activity level, its busyness, its timbre. Do you have a lot of high frequency stuff? Maybe you need some mid frequency stuff. Do you have a lot of basses? Maybe you need some mid range. Are you occupying all of the frequency spectrums? Is there a hole in the, say, 3K, 4K territory? Maybe you have a hole in the 500 hertz territory. Maybe it's not a bass. Maybe you just take the bass line that's banging along at 40 hertz, copy the MIDI and knock it up an octave or 2 or 3 to see that you have the bass part now is filling up more layers of your frequency spectrum. So trial and error is certainly one method. Getting control over sound design and getting control over your sounds and their behavior is absolutely necessary. Excuse me. And in that process, starting with the same MIDI material is really helpful. And then you might decide to change the MIDI of the second part because the behavior of the synth is close, but not perfect. So long answer to a short question. Tune 3, thank you for that. That's how I would recommend you find or build sounds. that work together. Okay. Good Lord, it's getting busy in here. Awesome. So let me back up here a second, find the next one. What is the fastest way to be a professional producer where you know the things you need to know? Jesus. I think the word professional is a matter of opinion. There are people putting out records right now who are not nearly as informed as they could be. And there are people who know way more than I who fail at putting out music or even coming up with ideas. And that's not a slam on either of them. Both can be professionals, both can be amateurs. It's a matter of opinion. I think you are a professional the day you get paid for it. So no matter how good you are or how much you know, the day you get paid for it, you are a professional. And if you're worried about making that step because nobody's ever called you a professional, if you've been paid for it, congratulations, you are now officially a professional. If you haven't, then go get paid for it. And then you are a professional. But the fastest way to do it is to, I don't know that there really is a fast way to do it. This is a lifelong process. You know, some of us have been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years, and some have been doing it for one. There's a certain amount of time and reflection, personally, creatively, socially, perhaps emotionally, and maybe even spiritually. There's a certain amount of reflection that you want to have. If you put out a record on a Monday, Tuesday is not enough time to reflect on how good it is. Monday of the next month, maybe of Monday of the next year, probably. Time is an amazing tool. It's also your enemy, where you want to be there. You want to be there now. What can I do right now? What can I do? I got to go faster, 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 faster. I'm of the opinion that faster is not necessarily better. Better is better. Better might be fast and better might be slow, but better is better, and time is something you might need to just reflect on the work. It may sound great to you today, and in 2 years, after you've picked up 5 new production tricks, you might say, "Yeah, I can't believe I put that out without sidechaining my chords to my kick drum. Like, I can't believe I didn't do that." Well, you have to learn, and it takes time, and it's a staged development. I would say that getting as much information as possible is of benefit, but we're here on YouTube right now. YouTube's the source, right? Google and YouTube, those are the sources for information. But information is not necessarily knowledge. I would also recommend you work with somebody who you respect, or somebody who has guides for you, someone who can shave time off of your process. Maybe they can become a mirror to reflect your work back to you in a way that you would need more time to do on your own. Whereas working with, say, a coach or a mentor or a teacher in a class, they might be able to say something to you in a way where you say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I wasn't doing that." Or, "Wow, I'm already there. I should be working on my marketing and my branding," which might also be the case. Again, you're professional when you get paid for it, but also you're professional when you say you are. You can let other people judge the quality of things, and you can use that reflection to determine whether you feel like you're at that point or not also. The short answer, there's no fast way. The fastest way is to develop a perspective on your work. Time is usually that function, but if not time, like I say, working with somebody who can cut that time down for you, and then speed up your development process. But there's a certain amount of time in the oven, you just need to do. If you're baking a cake and the recipe calls for 30 minutes at 300 degrees, 29 minutes at 250 degrees isn't good enough. You can't just accelerate the process and expect the result to be as good. And as you probably know, I like food metaphors for this process. Great question, but yeah, like I say, I don't know that speed should be the goal. Food for thought. Awesome. Pressing onward. ABCDEFG says all my melodies sound like crap. Good Lord. I don't know how to help you exactly there. Uh, I don't know what sounds like crap means to you, so I can't help you fix that problem necessarily. Are they too short, too long, too boring, too simple, too unrelated to the rest of the chords? Are they too busy? Are you playing them in? Are you clicking them in? Are you trusting arpeggiators to make them for you? Something in your process is not working, and it may just be a matter of really understanding scales and the power of each note in the scale, as well as the power of the distance between the notes, called the intervals. Um, if I could take a moment here, let me jump and see if I can. I'll actually show this to everybody because melody is a thing. Okay, so hopefully you all are seeing Logic and the keyboard on the screen right now. I'm going to play in C major for a moment just for simplicity. Those are the notes. C major, kind of the beginning of it all. Its usefulness is limited to happy, mellow, peaceful, plain, vanilla, boring, simple, childish, childlike, innocent pieces of music. Those are not good things. Those are not bad things. Those are emotional descriptions. You can assign it's good or bad to it. But looking at the C major scale, there are some things that you want to recognize. You want to recognize that a major third has a happy sound. You want to recognize that a major second has kind of a, I don't know, I describe it as beginnings or sunrise, or really the moment before the sky starts turning colors. Something like a major seven has a kind of yearning or a wistful feel, right? So you can start leveraging the power of the spaces between the notes to develop melodies. I also talk about melodies in terms of things called runs and jumps. So I just improv that, but the idea is that one, and then this is a jump, so I jump notes, and then run them up. And then run them down. And then jumps. So combinations of runs and jumps, playing with rhythm while you're doing runs and jumps, picking notes and hitting them harder and longer when they're powerful notes and kind of playing them shorter and in between other notes if they're weaker notes. Which note is strong, which note is weak, I leave that to you to decide. I have my system. Everybody eventually ends up developing their own relationship to notes. But practice on the scale is by far the fastest, best, most long-lasting technique so that you have a real fluidity with the fingers in the scale, or fluidity with the fingers in the scale if you're playing push or an APC or whatever the input device is, to develop a sense that you can already sing the song in your head and then your fingers just know where to go to find that sunrise or that happy or that strong or that wistful sound or that, sort of outer spacey sound, right? Floating in the stars and in the clouds.
Matt.
I know that. Those are fifths. Right, so
Audio not coming out.
audio's not coming out?
Yeah, on the stream.
Oh, dude,
Yeah. Don't know. We tested it, right?
we did test it. Oh, weakness. All right, hang on a second. I gotta jump in here. Sorry, guys. I was playing a whole bunch of stuff in the melody. Apparently, the sound wasn't coming out. My apologies. Everything I said is still true.
It should be mounted right there, right?
I don't know. I mean, I'm hearing it in my headphones. I just don't know why anyone else isn't hearing it. It looks like it's going out the Soundflower 2 channel. So I'll press onward in the meantime. Thanks for letting me know so I don't waste more time. Appreciate that.
We'll check that out before the next live stream.
Yeah, no worries. So anyway, long story short on melody, probably too late. Know your scales. Be fluid with your scales. Know the power and the value and the emotional state of each of the notes. For the record, these are things that I lay out in black and white in the P&A 101 class. I'm not pushing it. I'm just saying that's a place where you can really work on melodies, because it's really a lot about notes and choice and key and scale and that sort of power. All right, so, oh look, Andrew put up the link to the book. Awesome, thanks, dude. Appreciate that. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If your melodies sound like crap, practice your scales, brother. Sorry. Taylor, don't make the build up so loud, or take out some of the bass elements, or add a high pass filter to it. You can have a bunch of big elements back to back. It needs to be a roller coaster. Dude, Taylor, yes! That is exactly what I'm talking about. Roller coaster. We should have an emotional ride. Music's supposed to take you someplace, and it's supposed to be fun. And it's supposed to move you in ways that maybe it isn't moving you otherwise. I'll come back over here and give me a little sort of infinity zoom there for a minute. Yes, I agree. Fix your problem in your mix. Don't fix your problem in the master fader. And if nobody knows what I'm talking about, we're going back to the question of, what do you put on your master fader? And the answer is nothing. Awesome. Okay, bear with me. I'm going to jump forward. Thank you, Taylor Harper. I agree. I agree. Hi, Matt. How to develop great chord progression without being catch by boring or overused ones? Oh, how do you make chord progressions while still maintaining a sense of uniqueness? Good news and bad news. Which do you want first? I'll give you the good news. I'll give you the bad news. The bad news is also the good news. There are only 12 notes. We only have 12 of them. They are C, C sharp, sometimes called D flat. Sorry, Ableton, there are flats. D, E flat, F, E, sorry, hello. I'm going to start that over because I'm speaking gibberish. C, I'll just do sharps. I'll speak Ableton today. C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then C again. So we only ever have 12 notes. How on earth can you sound unique when there are only 12 notes? The answer is the combinations are infinite. Making chord progressions is a process of understanding the mood, or mode is the word I use. I use them interchangeably. Understanding the musical territory your song wants to live in. Within that territory, there are some very functional chord progressions. Major, for example, the 1 4 6 5, or any combination of 1 6 4 5. Look up The Axis of Awesome, the 4-chord pop song. If you don't know this, crazy, you got to know it. They play 40, 50 songs in a row with the exact same chord progression. So how do each of those songs sound unique when they're really just the same 4 chords? Well, we have a difference of instrument, tone, timbre, speed, recording. I may have said production, I'll say it again. Production, key, inflection, personality, mood. When you have that many combinable elements and 12 notes, the combinations expand out to infinity. There are techniques like not using just a block root chord, so it's not everything is 1 3 5, and then you move and it's 1 3 5. So you have inversions is another technique you can use. You have octave spectrums, up 8 octaves to play with. You have layers. You have complex chords, things like major chords. Add 7, add 9, add 11, add sharp 11, add 13, add sharp 11, flat 13. So you have richness and complexity. You have motion with your chords, upward, downward. If he did a 1 6 4 5, maybe you should do a 1 5 6 4. Same 4 chords, but now you have uniqueness. So the combinability of them all becomes a matter of playing with all of the levers of creativity. Again, octave, inversions, length of time, rhythm, instrument choice, layer of instrument, key. All of these things conspire to start making what start as very simple chord progressions end as more complex or more interesting chord progressions. I apologize, you probably won't hear this, but I'll just visually demonstrate something for you, so bear with me a moment. I'll figure this out. We'll do that and go over to Logic. Just to give you an idea, if you can't hear that, that's fine. This is just C major. It goes dum bum bum dum bum bum. Something simple like adding a 2 instead of a 3. So we're going to take this dum, take it out and put in this one dum bum bum bum. You have a completely different chord. Or put in the 4, so it's bum bum bum. You also have a completely different chord. Now you have 3 versions of the chord C, where you can play 1 and do that in a rhythm, and now all of a sudden just a simple 1 chord takes on a life and emotion of its own just by suspending it between the 2 and the 4. And then you have variations of this, and then this, or this. You can kind of move it up and down. And then you have this C major, and this C major, which suspends in different ways depending on how you play it. So that's just suspension, which is this tiny little technique to take a simple chord within a very common chord progression and make it do something different. So again, we come back to behavior. And what are your choices in behavior of the parts? What are your choices in behavior of the chords? Choosing chords is the same for everybody. The behavior within the chord is unique to you. So that would be my answer there. I'm going to come back over here for a moment. Hope that works for you. And thank you for the question. It's a great one. Okay, so moving onward. Oh, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Awesome. Some clarity. All my melodies are bad. I know advanced music theory, harmony, and can play guitar chord progression, but my melodies pale. That's helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you. And in a way, you kind of proved my point, which is that information is not knowledge, right? Knowledge is an active process that has trial, error, experience, observation, and an adjustment of process. If you know the theory, if you can play them on guitar, it might be a matter of dissecting bunches of other melodies and just playing melodies for a while. Playing guitar and playing chords and playing harmony, looking at somebody, say, like The Edge from U2, who is a great guitarist in terms of tone and timbre and chord structure and inversion chord structure and using delay to help him create rich harmonies. Not a great guitarist in terms of melody. He's no Steve Vai, he's no Guthrie Govan, but he's brilliant because his music sings. And so it's not about the amount of notes, it's about the choice of notes. And players will usually talk about something called the approach. How do you even approach the note? A single note of music can be incredibly powerful. Anyone who's ever listened to Miles Davis knows that it really doesn't require, you got his bebop period where he was just blowing faster than anybody else. And then he started slowing down. He went modal, and then he started playing with Evans and switched to flugelhorn. And then somewhere between there and Bitches Brew, time seemed to disappear for him. And the approach to playing a single note was more powerful than anything else. And Miles could play one note with exactly the right timbre, volume, entry, and expression, and he would say volumes in a single note. And that's a one-note melody, and people just go, right? So I don't think it's about technique on the instrument as much as it's about choice and behavior, and coming up from within the music as opposed to at the music. Playing a scale is playing at the music if your head and heart and ears and mood and are not fully aligned. So when head and heart and ears and concentration are fully aligned in what you're trying to say, and playing things slower with more texture and detail, my guess is you can write simple melodies and they'll sound great. It's a very deep subject. If you want to do more, I'm happy to work with you one-on-one. You can just go to the Mentorship Network and grab me. I'd love to hear some of your melodies and see if we can dig in. It might just be a simple tweak of process and a simple tweak of thinking might make your melodies amazing. And they might just be great, and you might just be being hard on yourself too. I don't know. Again, reflecting something back to you to help you see where you really are could be helpful. It's Matt at Pyramind.com, ABCDEFG. You're going to have to give me a real name, though, just for the record. Awesome. Thank you. Moving on. Veteran. How can you make minor keys sound more hopeful, more happy, without heavily relying on major keys and chords? That is a fantastic question. How do you make sad chords sound happy? And for that matter, how do you make happy chords sound sad? Can you even do that? And the answer is yes, absolutely you can. I spoke earlier about levers of creativity to pull. And here you also have a couple of levers. So a simple C major chord. Well, I'll give you a bird's eye view into it. I'll do this from the major perspective. Actually, I'll do it from the minor perspective. It's fine. Let's take a chord like C minor, right? C, E flat, G. I'll play it for you so you can see it. But pretty much everyone, those of you following at home, you should know C major, that being the key ingredient, C minor, okay? Again, I know you probably can't hear that, but you can do that for yourselves for sure. A simple triad, C, E flat, G, is a C minor chord, but we have the power to respell the chord, say E flat, G, C, first inversion, or G, C, E flat, second inversion. And unlike language, or the spoken language or written language, when you misspell a musical word, it's still the same word. So C, E flat, G, C, and G, C, and E flat, in that order from the low note up to the high note, those are all C minor chords. They're all just C minor. You can make them sound different. Each inversion, in fact, on its own, just does sound different. Ironically, this is also in the B&A 101 class, but I use different words. The proper name is root inversion, first inversion, second inversion, and that's correct. I add to that, I guess, for simplicity, rock, paper, scissors. Everybody knows, right? Boom, paper covers rock, right? Boom, rock breaks scissors. Boom, boom, boom. Scissors cut paper. It's a neat little triangular relationship where all three of them have power over each other. Well, the root inversion I call rock because it's big and dumb and heavy. And a minor chord in rock inversion sounds sad and heavy. But a minor chord in first inversion I call paper. I call it paper because without the root underneath it, the chord sounds kind of thin and floaty, like a sheet of paper. And it starts to sound a little bit happier because it's not so heavy, it's not so serious. So a minor chord, inverted, sometimes is a little bit of a lighter mood. When played down here, it's one thing, and then when played, say, up here, it's an entirely other thing. So you have the lever of inversions, and you also have the lever of octaves. Higher frequency things tend to sound happier. So major chords played low and slow are perceived as being sad. Minor chords played high and fast are perceived as being more happy, which I think is how a lot of dance music, a lot of EDM really works. They're mostly Aeolian sad progressions, but they don't sound it because they're banging at 120, 128, 142, 135 BPM. They're banging along at a fast clip with big, bright, happy synths, and they're played up high. And so that tends to translate to being a little bit happier. But rounding out the inversion discussion, we had root inversion is the rock, first inversion is paper, and then second inversion is scissors. And they're scissors because they're strong, like rock. They have a fifth in the bass, which is a strong note. And they're up from the foundation. So if I play a bass note, it's C, and then I play a minor chord where the low note is C, I've got doubling of the C. But if I play it in second inversion, I've got a fifth up here. So I've got a C and then a G up here. It tends to make the bass more sharp, more focused. It's a neat way to remove sounds that are too bassy. Instead of going to EQ, you can just invert the chord. 7 out of 10 times, that actually fixes all of your mixing problems. And it's a thing I call mixing by inversions, where you can identify a low frequency sound and perhaps a also slightly low frequency sound that might be fighting, or they're getting a little cloudy. Maybe they sound great together, in which case you leave them alone. But if they start fighting, you can take the chord and just invert it, and then invert it, and then invert it, and then invert it, and move it upwards so that it starts playing less low end. It starts cutting through the mix more, particularly in second inversion. So, rock, paper, scissors. Root, first, second inversion. Hope that helps. Awesome. Let's jump up and down here. Okay. Xparrow. Is it better to use distortion paddles? Pedals. P-E-D-A-L-S. Pedal. Ped for foot. Sorry, I'm a spelling nerd. Don't take it personally. Is it better to use distortion pedals for guitars on the kicks? If you like distortion pedals are awesome. They're usually built electronically to receive an electric guitar dry signal and then feed an amplifier, which between the two preamps and then the two power amps and just the sheer volume and then speaker cones moving and air moving in a room smooths out a lot of the harshness. But I remember back in the 90s, people were running everything they could through distortion pedals and no amplifier, and they just got harsh, nasty, real sharp, scratchy distortion sounds right through the pedal, and that was a desired sound. You could do that for kicks, you could do that for guitars, you could do that for anything. I don't know that I would use a pedal itself because it can be inconvenient, particularly, again, if you don't have an I.O., you don't have a way to get sound out of the DAW into the pedal properly and then back from the pedal properly. You should have a little bit of a foundation in audio engineering and wiring and a little tiny bit of electronics. There's a company, there's a product called the Reamp, Reamp, R-E-A-M-P, and it's designed specifically to take balanced signals and unbalance them so that you can go into a guitar pedal or a guitar amp. If you're interested in making distortion loops like that, you should get a Reamp. Just suggested one to my buddy Gene in New York. Gene, what's up, dude? Saying hey. And I think he's digging the hell out of it. He's running sounds out of Ableton into the real world, into the pedal, and then back into Ableton. So if you have that capacity, sure, distortion pedals are awesome. There are lots of them, and they all have a neat, unique characteristic. If you don't, then you can absolutely use distortion. It's just not a pedal. Hope that helps. Awesome. Put the book on Audible and narrate it. Thanks, Stephen. Like I don't have enough to do in my time. Good Lord. That's an interesting idea. I'll check it out. We'll talk to the boys and see if that's something we want to tackle. Thanks for the suggestion. Hey, ABCDEFG, you're back. Awesome. With digital synths sound, it's all about a lot of tricks adding up. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Sure. Not always, because sometimes people make huge sounds in one synth, but there are lots of little functions that layer in and texturize, and you can't necessarily hear how it's three different synths behaving similarly. It sounds like one big synth with a lot of complexity. Sure, absolutely. As long as you're not clipping and are under zero, you can turn up your volume. Yeah, sure. What do I think of Diva from Yuhei? I'm not familiar with it. I'll go check it out. I'll let you know next time I get my hands on it. And mastering engineers are overrated. I would, how do I say this? A true mastering engineer is absolutely not overrated. Someone who has spent a long time finely tuning their ears and choosing products and equipment and wiring specs to have the absolute lowest amount of noise and the absolute highest amount of fidelity. There are plenty of mastering engineers who have spent small fortunes building really well-designed, well-tuned machines of listening detail. They are not overrated at all, not even close. There are, however, plenty of people who are doing mastering, and whether they are mastering engineers or not is a matter of perhaps opinion. And some of them might be charging you money for work where they do nothing more than fire up a preset, run it through like everybody else, and call it a day. I don't know. I just think I hate to make blanket statements, so I would say before you hire a mastering engineer, ask them a little bit about their gear, ask them about their process, um, ask them about what are some of the things that they listen for. Maybe they have examples of before and after that they can share with you. Maybe they could just refer to you to other clients or to other projects or products that they've done. Um, if you can hear a before and after, that's always best. You don't always get that from a mastering engineer, but um, I would take your time and make sure that you choose someone who maybe fits your budget, but also somebody who has put in the time and the energy and the effort to develop an actual mastering suite, even if it's digital tools, but an actual mastering suite where they really have good monitoring and they can really hear the differences they're making. These things don't always give you enough detail. And anyone mastering on headphones exclusively, that would be a question. I would have a question with that. Awesome. Ha! Lucas! Can you talk about your 1+1+1 rule? Yeah, so Lucas Krosny, thank you. First of all, Lucas brought me a very lovely bottle of scotch, a Hibiki Double Harmony. Just for the record, if you want to bribe me, I like scotch. Just putting it out there. So yeah, Lucas, I can talk about the 1+1+1 rule for you, buddy. Sure. When you look at it, it makes no sense. I'm referring to this comment that says 1+1+1 equals 1. Now, I don't know how many of you were here at the beginning, but I made a couple of math nerd jokes, and pretty sure that 1+1+1 does not equal 1. So why did I say that, and why is it a rule? It's not a rule, it's a suggestion, it's a guideline, and it has to do with arranging. A lot of students come to me and they struggle with finishing songs. And the truth is that creatively they have great parts. They've written what amounts to be, hey, there's a really great song in there. Good sounds, good behavior, good movement, good mood, there's emotion, there's structure, it makes sense, but they can't finish it. Sometimes what they have is great, but it's not enough. Sometimes it's great, but they have too much. And sometimes it's great, they have enough, it's not too much, but something's missing. Over time, the interest level, it just sort of slowly fades away. I mean, I started a song and I loved it, and then 20 seconds went by, and then 30 seconds went by, and then 40 seconds went by, and then 50 seconds went by. Oh shit, the song's still playing. And you have to stop and say, well, what's going on? Why am I bored? Why am I falling asleep? Why am I looking at my watch? Why am I looking at my phone? And the answer is that, much like earlier, someone said, it should be a roller coaster. I think music should be a ride. It should be a roller coaster. Not out of control to the point where your face is falling off, but it should be fun. It should be entertaining. And oftentimes, as we move from one section to the next, there's a failure to have enough emotional impact, enough punch. And the way you achieve punch is by having three things change at the same time. 1 + 1 + 1 equals 1 energy shift. So 3 individual changes, whatever they are, synchronized, appropriate, intelligent, 3 changes tend to lead to 1 shift in energy. The mood just got more intense. We just had a big release moment. I mean, the whole function of the drop is that we build tension to an excruciating point and then release it in one big boom, right? That's like 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals 1. So in short, I usually recommend 3 changes or more synchronous between sections to make the impact. Now, what 3 changes? That's where your creativity comes in. And we can talk about that if necessary. Thanks, Lucas. And no, I haven't cracked the bottle yet. I'm waiting for you. Okay. No, there's an art form to it. What did he say? Oh, mastering engineers, yeah. Let me get back to that. Elijah says... Where did Elijah go? Hang on a second. I lost your comment. Hang on a second. Oh, okay. Hold on. The stream gets really fast, so I have to back up. There we go. There's Lucas. Taylor. Elijah says, why? What is it? Why 6, 7 in minor and 4/5 in major movement so popular in pre-choruses. Why these chords? Is because it builds anticipation for tonic, or is it 7/1 in Mixolydian? Yes. Elijah Locust? Yes. All of it. Yes. I don't want to go too deep into this because I'll spend hours on it, but suffice to say that in Aeolian, the 1/7/6, in Lydian, the 1/2/3, and in Mixolydian, the 7/1/2, these three chords are very powerful, and they, I guess you can think of them as a train roundabout. Many trains, and a trains in this case represents emotional states or moods. You have multiple moods all coagulate in these three chord potentials, and then from these three chord potentials you can shoot off into any other kind of pathway. In Lydian, you can shoot off into Aeolian. In Aeolian, you can shoot down into Lydian. You can go into Mixo. You can go up to Ionian. You can go anywhere from those three chords. I end up calling it no man's land. So, in answer to your question, yes, it's popular because it's flexible. And it gives you the opportunity to move to various territories while holding and maintaining a certain level of both interest and tension at the same time. Nice. Great question. Agree on master volume. I am the same way of thinking. Yes, awesome. Thanks, Lou. Fukushi, what's up, dude? Back again. Do you have any tips for someone who's used to make pop music but is getting more into synchro for film? Yeah, lots of them. Too many to go into. I would start by making sure that you have a very good grasp of various classical composers in various regions and various time periods. Most people would say classical music, film score, sure, I guess I got to go listen to a bunch of Mozart and Beethoven. And that's not necessarily the best place to start, in my opinion. I mean, Mozart and Beethoven are amazing, but they're the middle of the top of the top of the classical period. A lot of modern film music is based on other composers. You should be studying Anton Dvorak. Spend a ton of time with the New World Symphony. Spend a ton of time with Gustav Holst and the Planets. I would spend a lot of time, and have spent and continue to spend a lot of time with the Russian Five. I'm rediscovering Prokofiev right now. These are the late 1700s, early 1800s folk, Mendelssohn. But also look to like Aaron Copland for the American sound. Look to Gustav Mahler and look to Debussy for the Impressionist sound. Things of much more floaty kind of a nature. You can take this whichever way you like, but I'm a very big fan of Hans Zimmer. Not to mention, besides the fact that he's scored some of my favorite films, his music is incredible. In a lot of ways, it's simplistic. It's kind of pop music that's been orchestrated brilliantly for film. But if you break it down, a lot of it's got very simple pop chord modal elements. A lot of film score is modal. It's just at a very high, detailed, and fast-moving pace, where you might have 5 measures of Dorian, and then the next 7 measures of Aeolian, and then a dominant shift to another key, and then slipping major minor into some other world. But each of the constructs within a score is actually potentially quite simple. Depends on the composer, of course. But I think that the best thing you can do in the short term is to study the old classics, as well as study the modern classics. And that comes from film and gaming. If you're into the classical period, the Mozarts, the Beethovens, spend some time with the score to Uncharted. That's a really good one-to-one relationship. If you're interested in dubstep, you should be spending a lot of time listening to the Russians, and you should be listening to the score to, say, God of War. Anyway, the idea is to transition from pop to film and gaming revolves and involves a pretty deep study of orchestration, the instrumentation, and just the musical structures, the timing, the tempo, the size, the power, the grandeur of many classical composers. Okay, awesome. Other than a limiter, those are the main tools in mixing. I'm sure you would agree mixing is an art form. I would. It's not about the tools you use, it's about how you use them. I would agree. That's 2 for 2, Taylor. You're onto something. Mixing to me is like playing golf. It's okay if you don't play golf. I used to play a lot more. I don't play as much as I used to. Just don't get time. But golf is a matter of perfecting your swing. With a perfect swing, you only need 4 clubs. You need a long, a medium, a short, and then a putter. And I've seen guys twice my age with half of my clubs just crushing me on the golf course because they're not trying to hit it 250 yards. They're trying to get it straight and centered every time. It's about putting the ball in the right position with simple, clean, repeatable swing. Mixing is about achieving a repeatable sound. It's about knowing how to achieve that sound because you've achieved it before and you remember how to get there. What are those tools? They're usually simple tools. You're going to need equalization to balance your frequencies. You're going to need dynamics of some sort to control your volumes. Without automation, of course, you can use automation as well. You're probably going to need a reverb, a delay, some sort of smearing tool, phaser, chorus, flanger, shifter. You might need some pitch tools. You might need some distortion tools. Simple. It's a simple arsenal of tools. You don't need 2,500 compressors. You need a few that sound really good, and you know when to use which one. So yeah, I would totally agree. It's not only an art form, and it's less about the tools and more about the tonal results, and you can do more with less. Again, time, repeated process, and really practicing and studying is the best possible tools you can have. Awesome. Thanks, Taylor. Ed Space, any tips for composing and arranging tracks before going into the mix phase? Yeah, tons of them. But they're usually situational, meaning each song presents a different opportunity for what to do before going into the mix phase. But generally, what shouldn't you focus on during the composition phase? Yeah, great question. I am a big believer, Ed, in 3 somewhat separate processes. That there's a creative phase that kind of bleeds into the arranging organizational phase, that kind of bleeds into the mixing presentation phase. The more separated they are, the faster and more efficient you'll be in each of them. The more overlapping they are, the more textural the result tends to be. So I think it's about finding a sweet spot between when to be creative, when to organize, and when to present. The biggest tip I suppose I can offer, particularly before entering the mix phase, and for the record, I'm usually arranging while I'm writing and I'm arranging while I'm mixing. To me, that's just, I'm always kind of organizing the flow and detailing the shape of things. But when I'm writing, I just keep it to a yabo and I just write. I just throw ideas on the wall. I'll clean them up afterwards, and then I'll throw more ideas on the wall and clean them up afterwards. And then eventually I come to a point where I ask myself 2 questions. Is it enough? Yes, it's enough. Okay, check. Boom. Move on. Is it too much? No, I don't think it's too much. I think it's about right. Okay, check. Boom. Now I can start mixing. But make sure you're really clear on those questions. What's enough and what's too much? Is it too busy? Is there too much low frequency? Too much high frequency? Does this section get a little muddy and confusing? Maybe there's not enough in the first verse. I don't have enough impact in my sections. Maybe by the time the drop comes, I'm bored. Maybe the drop comes too early. Maybe I think it comes fine, but every time I play it for people, they kind of jump when that happens. Maybe they're not prepared for it. They're not expecting it. Well, maybe I need more time there. Maybe it's not enough. So you can define these however you want, but it basically between arranging and mixing, is it enough? Yes. Is it too much? No. Okay, then start. The quality of a finished mix master is 99% determined by the mix, 1% by the master. Yeah, I would go as far as 5%, but I agree that the primary function should be in the mix. Yeah, it's, garnish and salt, pepper to taste, mastering. Too much salt, you ruin the meal. Not enough salt, the flavors don't jump out. So there's a subtle art to knowing exactly how much of that to put on there. Plating and presenting and making sure everything is sitting beautifully and on the plate and that all the parts are there. That's the job of, I think it's the sous chef. I don't know, I'm not in the restaurant industry. The guy who goes from the pass, who goes from the kitchen to the servers, make sure everything is perfect on the plate. That's basically your mastering engineer. You can't even get to that role until you've mastered all the other stations of the kitchen. So yeah, I would go as high as 5%, but I do agree that the majority of it is in the mix. And for the record, I've got 210 right about now, 209 right about now. So I've got about another 20 minutes. So I'll do my best to get through as much as I can here. When I master, I have everything in 100 hertz in mono and use the free plugin Span to place my sound in their own space and an SSL compressor to glue the sound together. Do you have any more tips? That's a good one. Using mid-side EQ is a fine idea. Monoing your bass at or below 100 hertz is fine, wherever the number is. That's one thing. Mid-side EQ, you can make sure that maybe the sides have a little more high and the mids have a little more mono presence, and perhaps the mid-range or whatever is important. Yeah, I don't want to turn this into necessarily a mastering engineering session because, again, it's a matter of more than any tool or technique, mastering becomes a matter of listening. And if you're in a proper environment where you can actually hear what a half dB bump at a narrow bandwidth of 2K, if you can hear a half dB increment, then you should be well prepared to master. If you can't hear a 2 dB increment in an EQ, I think you're probably not in the right environment to be mastering. So whether you have the right tools or techniques becomes, in my opinion, secondary, maybe even irrelevant. I'm going to quote Michael Romanowski here, my friend and mastering engineer here in the Bay Area. Michael always said that the most important tool in a mastering engineer's tool chest is the room. That being in an environment where you can hear those subtle details is by far the most important part of this whole process, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. Awesome. Hey, Matt, great live stream. Hey, thanks, Audio Journey. Appreciate that. Thanks, man. Have you got any process general guides that you use to build up from an 8-bar loop, adding risers, effects? Oh, dude. You had me at, hi, Matt, great live stream. You lost me at risers. Joking. For the record, though, I have been known to get visibly and discernibly upset when people overuse risers. I'm going to go on record right here today at 2:11 p.m., September 14th, 2017, that we as a society, as a musical community, we are all now officially allowed to leave the riser behind. I've said it. We can be just fine without the risers. It's a fine technique when used properly, but it's been so unbelievably abused that I think it needs to go to a shelter, and it needs lots of therapy, warm blankets, and bowls of soup to recuperate and recover so that it can make a comeback stronger than ever. But right now, the riser is a well-punished technique. Please, God, no more risers. Just my opinion. Building up from an 8-bar loop, however, is still a legitimate question. And I do have lots of techniques. They usually come in the form of form and variation, pattern, repetition, and variation. An 8-bar loop repeated however many times eventually gets tiresome, and you run into what I call emotional inflation, which is that you just kind of over time stop caring. So the 8-bar loop has to grow, it has to change, it has to vary, it has to morph into some other manifestation. It has to say the same thing differently, use different words, perhaps communicate in a slightly different tone. You can see I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but with different terms. I'm trying to get the point across that an 8-bar loop can't stay an 8-bar loop forever. It can't. Kids grow up, cars depreciate, start falling apart. Taste buds grow on your tongue, and sweet things stop being interesting, and salty things start being more interesting. Your palate changes, your time changes. Even within the span of a 3-minute song, your palate changes, and your ability to accept the same thing over and over and over again changes and shrinks and diminishes. And it's just not. You just have to change it. You've got to change the 8-bar loop. It's that simple. All right, Maurice. Hey, what are some recommendations you have for those looking for co-writers, vocalists, or session players? Yeah, listen to their stuff first and make sure they're the right timbre. Meet with them personally, even if on the phone. Play your music for them and get a sense as to whether they're actually into it or not, and make sure they're not just trying to gank you for a $500 performance fee. Ask them what music they like. Do they like music that you like? Do they know what you want? And also, it's also a good idea to make sure you have your paperwork together. People get really funny around collaborations particularly when, God help you, they get successful. Well, I just did it for fun, man. I didn't pay you. I thought we were just having fun. I can't help it if the song went gold. Yeah, man. Well, I helped write that song, man. I'm entitled to some money, man. You owe me money. Ooh, you don't want to be in that situation. Have your paperwork together. If it's a work for hire, then you pay them cash and then you own their parts. If it's a collaboration, make sure they understand what they're entitled to or not entitled to. If you're doing it just for fun, I'm just saying it can get messy. Be careful. But it's a good idea, at least in an email, to say, just so we're clear, you're going to do this for me for free, but I still own the music, right? Just ask that question and see how they respond. Yeah. If I had to choose one DAW to produce, mix, and master, which would it be for me with less problems, Ableton, Cubase, or Studio One? Good God. My answer to you, I think it's 7. Which DAW is the best to produce, mix, master in with the least amount of problems, Ableton, Cubase, or Studio One? My answer is yes. Which means every DAW has a skill, every DAW has a specialty, every DAW has a thing that it does better than the others. I have no idea what you consider to be problems. Ableton is really stable and tends not to crash almost ever. Logic comes out the gate with a huge amount of tools. Studio One is a great sounding platform, as is Cubase. Cubase is home of the VST and open to more plugins than maybe than lots of other DAWs. I don't know. I would ask you what you're trying to do, what you're trying to make. Are you a piano player? Are you a composer? Are you a guitarist, a songwriter? Do you need to do a lot of recording? Are you loop-based? Are you just starting? I can't recommend one over the other until I know that information. How do I improve my transitions between sections? Is there a great book or resource? Yeah, a lot of the stuff isn't really covered in books. This is from John Faust-By. No, arranging is... the arranging that I've seen in books has to do with classical orchestration and arranging. Pop arranging, I think you're better off working with somebody personally as opposed to reading a book, even a book I could write. I don't know how I could write it. I mean, I've written it, and it's called the Producing and Arranging 101 course. And I'm not telling you need to take my course, but I'm saying it might be worth spending some time with somebody who's pretty good at that, who can help you zoom out of your song and help you figure out, where the energy is flowing. How good a ride is your roller coaster? But I don't know that I have a book that I can recommend to you necessarily. Again, that's something that I think is more situational, song by song. You're best off working with somebody who can really help you through. I may be far behind in time here. Okay. I can't hear the computer's argument. Okay, we went through that. Thank you. I'm trying to play the piano at the same time, but it's too fast. Sorry, dude. How can one stay patient with oneself? Meditation, Stephen D. Meditation. And whiskey. That helps me. You get overwhelmed and stressed about making music. Yeah. You're always feeling like you're running out of time and you need gratification. Right now. You don't. You don't need gratification. Sherman just finished my producing and arranging class. Sherman, if you're watching this, I'm talking about you, buddy. And I said something to him. It was just an offhanded comment. I was making a joke, and it seemed to have made a really long-lasting impact on him. And at the very last session, he held up a piece of paper that said, "Making music is fun." I remember now saying, I said, "Sherman, why are you stressing, dude? This is supposed to be fun. That's why they call it playing music. It's supposed to be fun. You're not supposed to stress out about this. Just have fun with it. If you have fun with it, someone else out there is going to have fun with it too." So, Stephen D., how can one be patient with oneself? Meditation, whiskey, and remember that music is supposed to be fun. I don't know if that helps. Take a break. Walk away from it. Have a sandwich. I have a big one. Paul Villas, boo, there's a joke in there. I'll leave it alone. I'm producing music for my own 10 years now. A year ago, I started to get more into sound engineering, room treatment, and so on. Aha! As I get more into this side of my music, my creativity goes down. Sure does. Maybe you've experienced something like this. I have. Could you make some loud thoughts about it? Sure! How can you come back into the creativity? What you're really touching on is that there are two halves of your brain and there are multiple processes of music. There's the creative, fun, right hemisphere. There is the organizational, sonic, mixing, technical component, cleanliness component, and that is the left hemisphere. I think you need both. And for me, it's a matter, I'll say this loudly because you said wanted it loud. For me, it's a matter of separating time to create and time to organize, and then time to create more, and then time to organize more, and then time to mix. So that when you're in each section of the creative process, you really work that side of the brain, so that you write when you write, and you'll just fucking mix later. You just discipline yourself to, I'll do that later. But I really want to EQ. I just wanna, but let me just, when you hear yourself saying the word just, if I just EQ it, if I just do, but let me just, no, that is your brain lying to you. It's saying, hey, right hemisphere is getting a little tired now, Maybe I got to go over and organize now. I just want to do, but then and then my brain will come back. No. Stay in the creative zone when it's time to create. Stay in the technical zone when it's time to be technical. As an artist, you have to master yourself more than other people have to master themselves. An accountant needs to be detailed in their work, but when they go home, they can do whatever they want because the job is done. As an artist, your job is never done. You live your job every single day, every hour of every day. You have to control yourself. You have to discipline yourself. You have to master yourself, organize yourself, and then control yourself as you go through life, which means you have to be able to set aside scheduled time for creativity, scheduled time for organization, sound design, asset organization, file management, whatever, emails, dedicated time to building your room and putting up soundproofing and running some tests and doing some listening. There are times to do all of these things, and you've got to be really, really focused. And when the time is to create, really focus on creating, so that when you're working on the audio and the mixing stuff, that's what you're focused on. And when it's time to write, just don't even touch that stuff. Just play. Remember, music's supposed to be fun. Stephen Seasmore Economy, is all music 5-1? No. All progressions are all 5-1 movement? No. That's one of the most powerful ones, but no, not all of them. No. I can't pronounce that. Is it Saike Pessoa? Thanks. New ideas coming now. Awesome. Appreciate it. Hey, ABC, what's up? Thanks for the active re-melodies, very useful. We'll think about the notes themselves. Yes, by all means, and I'm happy to, I got a whole process I can walk you through if you want to work one-on-one. I'm happy to do that. Camden Stoddard, what's up, dude? Hey, man. Hey, Matt, just wanted to thank you for continuing the knowledge drops. Keep rocking it. Cam Stoddard was a student of ours 1.5 million years ago. He is now the audio director at Double Fine Games and has been a friend to Pyramind for a very long time. Cam, love you, buddy. We're overdue to hang out and drink scotch, I'm sure. Thanks for checking in, brother. Yeah, and happy to keep sharing. Dave Gilden, at a 9th or an 11th? Absolutely. Trilogy, 1 of 2. In Ableton, is there a way to flatten audio from 2 audio tracks into one without doing a full export? You don't freeze and flatten them, but you could always resample them and just record them onto a single audio track. You can also just solo them and render them as an export. But to do it faster than that, 2 into 1? I don't think so. I mean, you can do it live if you change the output from master to sends only and crank up the sends to a single return. So let's say you make a return C and it has no effects on it, and you take the 2 tracks and you turn up send C all the way and set their outputs to sends only, then they both combine onto one track called a return. Maybe that'll help. But to take that audio and bring it somewhere else, you've got to export it or print it or something. You can also just group the 2 tracks, and then both of their audio shows up on one track, and then you can put plugins on that track, if that's what you mean. Maybe I don't understand. Sorry if that question's off topic. No, there's nothing off topic here. Something I do involves a lot of phase inversion and exporting every time. Gets pretty frustrating. Trilogy, sounds like you might need to do a deep dive with one of our guys in the mentorship network to dig into that. I'm not an Ableton expert, so I mean, I know it pretty well. I think I've offered two potential solutions, but it sounds like you were doing something a little more unique there. Diego, the Disney scale. Haha, it's called Lydian. Next. Yes. Fun fact about Coldplay's The Scientist. Ask anyone about the first chord and the first part of the melody of the song, and they'll probably say it's major, but it's actually a minor chord with the melody. Oh, I just lost it. God damn it. There it is. But it's actually the melody playing the triad of the relative major of the minor chord. Gives it a happy, still kind of sad cause minor thing. Yeah, sure. I talked about inversions, but you also have relative chords and chord substitutions and a lot of other techniques there. Thanks. Appreciate that. Thanks for doing this, Matt. You're a wise wizard. Thank you to Oxify. I very much appreciate that. Jeff Straw, however, has the wizard beard, so I shaved mine. My wife had stopped kissing me, so had to go. Sorry, that's how it goes. The Antelope Zen Camden says the Antelope Zen Tour interface also has two dedicated reamp channels for feeding through pedals. He has one that works great. Boom! There's your answer. Antelope Zen Tour interface. Thanks, Cam. Hey, so I just joined, so I don't know if this was asked already. Do any tips on making your chorus drops, climax stand out? My always end up sounding kind of flat. Yeah, it was kind of mentioned earlier. Go back and look for the 1 + 1 + 1 rule. Go back and listen to, this will be recorded, I'm sure, somewhere. Go back and listen to the conversation on the roller coaster and part behavior, and remembering that things are supposed to be fun. It's going to be too much to go into. There's no like one way. Hey, this is everybody. Let's just all do our drops like this. No, every song presents an opportunity. Every song presents a challenge. I'd have to hear what you're doing to identify specifically what's working and what's not working. Andreas, thanks for good advice. You're welcome, dude. Senjal, I'm referring to melodic movement mainly, not sound design or things like that. Maybe I missed. Oh, there you go. Melodic movement. Okay, so actually that does help. Thank you. So how do you make your choruses drop, climax stand out? I'm referring to melodic movement. I guess I'd answer it the same way, which is to go back and think and listen to conversation about melody. What's the behavior of a melody ahead of the drop? What's your behavior of your melody after the drop? Are we upward motion? Are we downward motion? Are we getting busier? Are we getting thinner? Are we getting smaller? Are we getting bigger? And then at the moment of the drop, what is the mood you want to deliver? Usually things pre-drop are in anticipation. They're sort of setting the stage and telling the story in anticipation. And then when you hit the drop, that's an area you want to stay in for a little while. So maybe it's a matter of complexity and then simplicity, or maybe it's a matter of simplicity and then complexity. I don't know. More than anything else, I would probably have you go back and write down some notes about the behavior of your melody pre and post, and then see if you can use that as a guide as to how to figure out the melody in the drop moment. But again, it comes down to I'd have to hear something to really understand where you're going. All right, I got to do only a couple more because I'm running out of time here. But first of all, thanks, guys. This is fun. I appreciate the questions and everything. Eldo Abraham, any tips on grids and quantizing? Yeah, be very, very careful. Grabbing all the notes and hard quantizing them is like Jimmy's first day with the quantize tool. Jimmy can spend more than one day on that. And if you're named Jimmy, I'm not making fun of you. That's just an expression I use. I personally don't quantize. I mean, if I do quantize, which I do, but not all the time, my playing is pretty okay. It's not great, but it's pretty okay, so it's usually close enough. I usually don't quantize at 100%. I quantize at 78%. And sometimes I'll quantize the hi-hats one way, the kicks one way, the snares one way. Sometimes I'll only quantize a couple of notes that are just not quite sitting right. So it's about picking and choosing more than anything else, as opposed to a global thing. I would also play with grooves, particularly in Ableton. There's a bunch there, or in Logic for that matter. There are a bunch of grooves. Play with that and see if the things can kind of help shift your timing into a more human way. Povilas, great tips over here. Thanks for the stream. Hey, dude, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Philocta, thanks, Matt, for all your answers. Yeah, man, you're welcome. My pleasure. How to create interest in variation for verses and chord structures after building loops, etc. Dharma Child. That is the $1 million question. Yeah, I have a structure that I go through in the P&A Producing and Arranging 101 class. Ways that you can take a simple loop and add variation, and it doesn't usually take a lot of time or a lot of effort or even a lot of thinking. There are definitely some simple ways to do it, but again, everything comes back to understanding the behavior of your part or your loop and finding creative and interesting ways to vary that loop and when. The levers there are vary, yes or no, how much, and when. Play with it. Thanks for all the insight today, Matt. Maurice, you're welcome. The audio journey. I had no idea you hated Riser so much. Not a fan. Not a fan. I joke, but I'm sure there are some styles where you just, it needs a riser. Because why? Because everyone else is doing it, and so you got to do it to fit in. But I'm just not that guy. I'm just not the do what everybody else does to fit in kind of guy. I'm cool by myself. I'll just do my own thing. I'm okay that way. It's comfortable, and I don't have anyone to answer to. And hey, there is my alarm. So it's saying it's time. I'm going to answer one or two more questions, and then, folks, I got to go. Remember, matt@pyramind.com. Feel free to shoot an email. If you've got something specific and really deep and burning, you can book time with me. Absolutely. Happy to do that, too. You can also take the course. There's a lot of the answers are just sitting there in the course waiting for you to read them. Just saying. Okay, here we go. Looking forward to the entire breakdown of the entire Madeon album. Yeah, it's going to take a while, dude, because there's so much there. I don't even know how long it's going to take me, but I promise to get at least part one of Isometric out next week. Just so impressed with that record. It just grows on me more and more. At first, I wasn't sure. I'll be honest, I was kind of like, I don't know. But you look past a couple of tiny little details that, were kind of nagging at me. The more I listen to it, the more I like it. The better it gets. And when a record gets better over time, that's a really good sign. And more than anything else, it's a sign that there's great songwriting. So if you're an EDM guy or an electronic dance person, you should be studying the hell out of Madeon's Adventure. You should just be studying it because there's a ton there to learn from. He goes through multiple styles, vocal melodies, singing, live playing. I think it's live playing, sounds live playing. There's some stuff in there that's just great. I mean, you could rip it down and play it on a piano and it would still sing. Anyway, I'm digging that record clearly. Paul, 100% separating technical and creative work. I assume you mean 100% agreement, not 100% separation, in which case, yes. Some overlap is good, but the more separated, the more efficient you get. Is music production for the video game industry different in general from other industries? Hell yes, it is different. It's more challenging, it's more technical. You have to know more and be faster at it. You have to be really talented, smart, but mellow. You work long hours in tight teams with tight deadlines under stressful environments. You have to be cool with yourself. You have to be cool with your teammates. You have to know how to work with creative differences between other artists and be respectful of their ideas. You have to listen more, and you, of course, have to know all of your technical game. All of your creative game, all of your technical game, and your interpersonal game, and your professional games all need to be grade A. Difficult. Can you use a 6 chord in a major key as a home bass? Alan. I don't know what you mean by home bass. You can go to the 6 chord a whole lot, but if you use the 6 chord as home and don't play the 1, then you're not in the key of the 1, you're in the key of the 6, in my opinion. So I guess I would say maybe. I don't know how to answer that. Okay, Alexander, you've got a bunch to say here. This is going to be the last question. Everyone else, I apologize if I can't get to you. I've got like 5 other sessions to go to today. One, regarding music business. Nowadays, there seems to be an oversaturation in every genre of music. There are a lot of people making a lot of music, and a lot of it's really good. Is it a recent phenomenon, or was it always the case? It was always the case. Always the case. If you were a band in the 70s, you were desperate to book shows and to bring fans so that you could book more shows. And the more shows you booked, the more money you made. The more money you made for the bar, the more shows you got booked. The more you drew attention of a manager, an agent, someone who wanted to work with you to grow you to the next level. It's always been like this. Musicians have fought for exposure and fought for audiences forever. It's never gone away. It's more crowded, perhaps, because there's more access, but there's also more access. So, yeah, I think personally, my opinion, it's always been like that. Um, all right, looks like Andrew's got a bunch of links up there. Thanks, Andrew. Paul says the sixth chord as home bass would basically be the relative minor key. Yeah, I guess that's kind of how I'm thinking of it too, but I don't know if that's exactly what he means. Can you quantize like 70% on Ableton? Desport Jonas. Thank you, Desport Jonas. Can you quantize? You can quantize like 70%. You can also quantize 70% without the like. Sorry, grammar nerd. Yeah, you can. When you bring up the quantize window, there's a bar underneath that says 100%. Move it to 70. The question is, what does that mean? And I'll let your brain stew on that for a while. How to compose in 3/4. Any nowadays pop song in 3/4. I don't hear a lot in 3/4, frankly. I mean, in pop, I guess, sure, but not so much in electronic pop. It's pretty 4 on the floory. That said, Armin van Buuren a couple of years ago came out with a song, This Is What It Feels Like, which was in 6/4 and then 4/4, which was kind of close. But 3/4 is kind of waltzy. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And a lot of people don't like to dance side to side unless it's a ballad, unless it's like a Lighters in the Air, God, I love you, man, if it's one of those kinds of songs. Folks, I got to go. Thanks, man. This is, thanks all. Great questions. Really appreciate it. Good conversations. I would love to do this again. Again, Matt at Pyramind.com. Andrew, if you're watching, I'd love to have you come in and help me break down here, turn off the stream. I hope to kind of talk with you again. I'll do the talking, you'll do the typing. Remember, you can get me at my email address or book time or join the class. We're off the ground now for September, but it's coming around again in January. And I'm also about to start on converting my Producing and Arranging 110 class to online, which is upper level harmonic stuff, chords, theories, modes, and other scales and other ways to write. And I think that's where a lot of people's songs start to elevate. Knowing some of the other chord possibilities, knowing some of the other keys and mood possibilities and ways to get in and out of various territories intelligently. That's definitely, I've found with some other students, it's been something of a game changer. So look for that early 2018. Otherwise, I am going to say goodbye. And I hope it's been great. Hope it's been good for you. I'm going to go over and stop the stream now. So thanks all. I'll see you later.